You are now listening to Carlie's Couch.
I'm Carlie.
And I'm Lex.
In this podcast, we discuss a wide array of topics about life and how to live your best life.
Whatever that looks like for you.
Hope y'all enjoy.
In today's episode of Carlie's Couch, we discuss how to prioritize long-term gratification over short or instant gratification.
Hello, everybody. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Thanks for sticking with us. I'm Lextopia. This is my friend Carlie's Couch. Not your name is Carlie's Couch now. This is my friend Carlie. Yeah. CC Fierce / Carlie Carpio / here's her mug. You can get it at bigcartel.com/Carlie's Couch. If you already have one, thanks. I hope you're sipping right now while you're listening.
Send us some pictures.
Mine says Capso CEO Big Lex.
Gang, gang.
But that's another topic for another day. Today we're excited to talk about like how do we get better at actually prioritizing those long-term things, because we all know what we're supposed to be doing, and yet a lot of times we'll choose the easier short-term thing. But before we get into that, we have a question from the couch that you guys so lovingly engaged with this week.
Man, okay, so what is the wildest untrue thing that you believed as a child? Mm-hmm. And so we have, if you step on a crack, you'll break your mama's back. We had that twice. And then the boogeyman. Yeah,
y'all believed in all the fake things. Boogeyman, Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus.
That was times 3 or 4.
Yeah, but the one thing about Santa Claus, because I thought about it, like, I feel like I remember believing Santa Claus, but I don't remember ever feeling like, oh, no, it's not real. So, like, I don't remember that. Do you remember being like, oh, man, it's real, not real?
Yeah, because
you got a story.
I had stayed up, like I slept in the living room because I was like, oh, maybe I'll catch Santa. I slept in the living room and my mom like tripped on something and made a noise, and I woke up and saw it was her. And I just like went to my bedroom very disappointed.
I can imagine being like, man.
Yeah, and I just like dragged my blanket back into my room.
Man, go ahead and put them gifts down, man. Dang, I'm gonna still be excited, but dang.
Shout out to Carlie though, because she tried, dog. She really did.
Yeah, I don't remember it. It's just like all of a sudden I was like, yeah, that shit don't make sense. Other things, that quicksand was imminent danger. I believe that too. I think in elementary school they taught us about quicksand. They taught us about all these things where it was like,
we just thought we were gonna have to face them in life.
Piranhas.
Definitely scared anacondas, like.
All that, like you was ready as if we actually lived in South America, and we do not. So that was not a problem.
One that I thought was hilarious, and I have similar thoughts, is I had a whole Truman Show delusion going on. Like I thought people just froze whenever I left the room, and so that's hilarious. I thought the opposite. Like I thought that my stuffed animals would come alive when I left the room, so I would steady be trying to set them up and catch them. I always wanted, like Toy Story. Like I really thought that they were just out there living their best lives.
Okay. One person said that why I say Ciara? Like I can't read. Sierra wasn't a woman, and I remember when those rumors were going around.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They did kind of slightly make sense a little bit at the time, but no, I'm pretty sure they're not real.
Then there was a bunch of cars. Like apparently our parents just been lying to us. So if I like touched the car ceiling upholstery, I'd be arrested. If I turned on the light, I would be arrested. Like all these things ended up in us being arrested.
Because a lot of those things with the car, your parents tell you stuff because they just want you to sit down. Like, you got to focus when you're driving, for real.
Yeah,
like, imagine kids in the car and like, yeah. So I think they just always be like, don't do that, stop doing that, whatever. And you just knew in the car you had to just sit there. So it is what it is.
Another one, that people who weren't Catholic would go to hell. Not sure I completely believed it because I remember having a lot of questions, but apparently I wasn't allowed to ask questions.
That's real. Look, people in a lot of the different Christian, I don't know, sects, I guess, or something. Like they believe like only them or only certain people, and that's not a kid's thing. That's everybody. Another one that a few people said is that if they swallowed a seed or a watermelon seed, that a fruit would grow inside you. I remember hearing that too. Oh, my little baby brother Addison, when he was little, he used to be so cute. He used to always have this big pot belly, and he ate so much fruit and watermelon. And I remember he ate all this watermelon, and his stomach looked real big, and we were like, oh snap! And I think I remember us tricking like, hey bro, it's over for you. I wish I could find some pictures. He was so cute. Aww. He was like the cutest little baby and little boy.
Man,
I sound like somebody's grandma. Jeez.
Yeah, you do a little bit.
Man, it's 35 this year.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Eating spinach will turn you into Popeye. Girls have cooties.
Shout out to Earl. She said she thought if grease popped her from the stove, she would melt like the Wicked Witch. That's That's fair.
And then adults have no idea what the hell they're talking about.
That's very real.
Valid. And then this last one, shout out to my homeboy Asa. That nobody was in Oklahoma when the land run happened. So when Oklahoma was founded in 1907 and became a state, prior to, it was actually owned by all Black people and Native American tribes, like pretty much the entire state. But then the way the government said was like, hey, there's all this new unfounded land to try to get people to move to Oklahoma. And so one day they just said, okay, we're going to have a land run. Wherever you run and stake your claim, that's your land. And they gave away all the Native Americans and Black people's land. And even if there was white people in the state, I'm pretty sure they didn't have their land either. So he brought that up and said it happened 50 years after the indigenous people were forcibly removed from their homelands and then given Oklahoma, and then it got taken away again.
Right. They already had the Trail of Tears to get there.
Yes, and then they took it away.
After that?
Yes.
God, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, so... Yeah.
That's crazy.
So shout out to him because I definitely believed that too, and then was like, wait, what?
Another thing that I believed as a kid, and I used it now when I babysit, is I thought my dad could go and blow the lights out.
Oh, that's cool.
And because he would go, and the lights would go off, and then he would go, and they would come back on. And he could do it for stoplights too. But back in the day, I didn't realize, like, oh, if you see this one turning yellow, this is about to turn green. So he'd be like, green light, and we'd be like, whoa, in the car. So I was babysitting Damo's babies, my friend, at the house, and I was like, I'm gonna have to pull out some tricks because one of the babies like 3, and I was like, watch this, and I'm at some point I figured out what my dad was doing. My back is to the light switch, so I go, and the light comes on. I'm like, and like you're moving it, whoop, whoop. Yeah, you're moving it with your back, the light switch. And she was like, ha, cool. And then she went back to Paw Patrol. So I was like, I need some better tricks. But that's one thing that I was like, whoa, especially at the green light when you're driving. I was like, yeah, we could just go through anytime, make it green. And he'd be like, not yet. All right. Ambrose funny.
She about to say, shout out to Ambrose.
I told him I pulled his tricks out too when I was babysitting. He was like, you remember that stuff? Like, yeah, you always remember those weird things.
You do. Aw, that's so sweet. And thank y'all for being so excited about this and giving us so many answers.
Yeah, let's actually get to the episode because I don't forgot what we was about to talk about. Okay.
She done pulled out a notebook, y'all.
Right. And so I pulled out one of my little yellow notebooks. I have 5,000 notebooks for random stuff. This one kind of came from something I was thinking about while I was in the Bahamas in January. So I'd spent the holidays in the Bahamas. And I remember over the holidays, I was... reading like some articles about ADHD and the brain, and I was researching this because what happened was I remember getting up to go do something. I don't remember what it was anymore, but I was going to go get something or do something. And then I walked past a bedroom to go do what I was doing. And then all of a sudden I was like, I need to go get my water. And then I came back to a room to get some water and drink it. And then I was like, dang, what was I doing? And then I went back and did what I did. But I was like, why do I always do that? Like, even though that's a simple thing, right? It's not like it's like a problem per se or like that was something so dramatic. But I just realized like it just makes no sense for me to backtrack to do something else that I just randomly thought about when I was on the way to do something else. And a lot of times, we do that, like even around the house, like, I'm headed to go do something in the kitchen, but then on the way I'm like, oh shoot, that needs to be done over here. Well, let me go do that real quick. Or what I'll do is I'll stop and be like, which one makes more sense for me how can I do all of this the fastest? So I'll be like, well, if I take my cup over here and then fill it with water and then on the way back I can grab this and then do that. So like it's like, why am I doing all that? And why did I choose to go backwards? So I started doing some reading and Googling because I was like, let me look into this. And I remember reading some stuff about how it's like, well, if you kind of have an ADHD brain, you're going to always choose what's going to give you a reward faster. And so I was like, oh, so it's like, sure, I was going to do whatever, but if I just go drink this water, it's like immediately satisfying. And so it's like, let me go do that first real quick. And it felt better and it feels good as opposed to the longer term thing. And I'll read what I actually had wrote that day. I hope I didn't mess up my story. But it says, earlier, I was reading an article on the ADHD brain, and I learned that when faced with the option to go the route that rewards you the fastest and the most, or to do what's less stimulating, and best in the long term, you'll always go with the former. So as opposed to like the thing that actually makes the most sense or is less stimulating. But that didn't click for me until later this evening. I caught myself doing just that. Initially, I got up to prepare my morning workout clothes. Oh, that's what I was doing. I started walking and then I doubled back to drink some water first. It occurred to me that even though it popped up in my mind second, the immediate reward of drinking the water would be higher at the moment. So here's what I'm thinking. What if I make a conscious effort to be aware of my brain when it pops up with something to do and fight against it instead of being sidetracked by short-term satisfaction? What if I decided to always choose long-term, even in and especially in the small things? You supposed to hit me with the dun dun dun.
I was about to, but I like.
I know you were.
better.
That's why I was like, go ahead, do it. Dun dun dun. What if we could always choose the decision that makes more sense for long term when we have these thoughts pop up, right? This to-do list that we always have. So that's what we want to talk about. Like, is that better? How is that better? Can you do that? So let's get into it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think we do it for an array of reasons, but whenever we're talking about choosing instant gratification over what's more important in long-term satisfaction, how does that affect our lives? Like, why is this even important to talk about, would you think?
I think because when you have things that you know need to get done for like the long term or things that make more sense, like eating better, right? We just talked about beating ourselves up and all that, right? And we know what we need to do. Like, you always know the things that are important, but let me just go watch this show first real quick, or, well, let me read a book first. We talked about mental masturbation and all that too. And I think what happens is that when we're always satisfying our short term, we could be saying like, oh, well, we're giving ourselves self-care, we're taking a break or whatever, but it really ends up making you feel like you're always still trying to do that long-term thing. Like, it's always on your to-do list. Like, I hate when it's things that's on my to-do list for low-key, it could be years sometimes. There's certain things on your to-do list, and it's like, I should actually do something towards that. So I feel like that keeps us sometimes in that cycle of being like, dang, like, I don't get things done, or I'm not getting any progress in certain spaces.
Yeah, and it can keep you from ever like reaching your true goals. And I also think that emotions, although they're valid, they can be very fickle and they're not necessarily always real. So I think even in the moments, it's like, oh, I'm sad, I'm gonna eat this instead of go doing this, or oh, I'm tired, I don't feel like doing this. If you wait until the right moment, you're gonna be waiting forever to actually do the hard things. And so that's why it's important to start with those. But if you find yourself like struggling with this, I think it affects people, like so many more people than we're even aware of. Like, the real ADD conversation and neurodivergence and things is just now becoming like more talked about and more understood, and recognizing how it actually impacts us. But go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm about to say, and I want to throw in there, I think people are talking about it a little too much also, because you know, every time you get on social media, and it might just be because we like looking at certain stuff, or once you like one thing, you see it. But it's like everybody thinks they're a therapist and a psychologist, and everybody's talking about ADHD. And so also I think it's careful. I think you had said this when we were talking about this before. For me, it's like, you know, careful to think like doesn't just mean like, oh, you have ADHD, right? If you want to do something chill instead of doing hard work, or, you know, the things that are less stimulating. I think a lot of it goes also into what we had talked about in a past episode as well, about our need for mental stimulation. And, you know, for sure, we probably need to regulate ourselves more and reel this back in. But it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, no, like, am I autistic? Am I ADHD? Am I this? Am I that? And so I kind of think we do need to probably look at some of that stuff a little bit less.
Yeah. And also, I think in that, like, people can get caught up in trying to diagnose themselves instead of trying to heal themselves, or just practicing doing better. And so that's what we're talking about today, is like recognizing these habits in your life. And if you feel like you might actually have, you know, neurodivergence or ADD, go get diagnosed for real. Like, go talk to somebody.
No, doctors hate Google and hate social now, because like, even when I went to go see a dermatologist, I was like, do I have blah, 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 blah? Because I had looked at all the, you know, things, and I'm like, dang, I got all these symptoms. He was like, it's just eczema. Like, and I'm like, and you know, it's like, you really want to feel like, but also it's hard because, you know, we want to advocate for ourselves, and it's like, but I'm also feeling this and this and this. And he's like, and I remember I felt so bad when he was like, I realized you may have read a lot of, seen a lot of TikToks, or read a lot of blah, blah, blahs. And I was like, dang, like, all right. But hey, it is what it is. I think it's cool to research, but also listen to your medical professionals, especially if they're like coming from the right type of place, right? If they're coming from like a holistic type place, and, you know, because you could tell when sometimes they're just like, they really don't care. So yeah, I'm not mad at a little research, but I agree with Carlie.
Yeah, about to say, yeah, please do your research. Please ask questions, but don't ever think that just because you have read a couple articles that you are now a doctor.
Yeah, and don't even think about us as doctors right now.
Please,
I don't know nothing about nothing. I'm going to tell you that right now.
And so I'm going to say this too. I am not a neuroscientist. I am someone who is interested in like neuroscience and history.
And we like to research and look up stuff. So
and
like,
optimize our lives.
Right. So that's what we're talking about with this. So Carlie, there's two sides of the brain. Can you talk about that, kind of like set us up for what's happening in our minds?
Mm-hmm. So there is the logical side of your brain, and this is very simplified. The logical side of your brain and the emotional side of your brain. So the logical side of your brain is the prefrontal cortex with the executive function. So think about that as like the executive function, the manager of your life. They kind of like put things in order and figure out what's important, super logical. And then you have the emotional part, the amygdala, which is fight or flight, protecting your emotions, doing those things. And so impulsive choices happen when the emotional part, the amygdala, overrides the logical part. For example, man, I need to eat healthy. I want to make sure I'm, taking care of my body and nutritious and have nutrient-dense meals.
Right.
Damn, that chocolate cake looks good. And you pick your chocolate cake over your pre-meal prepped meal because you want chocolate cake in that moment. That wasn't a logical decision because you already logically know what you want to do. But your emotional side, you're like, damn, the chocolate cake, instant reward. Damn, that's going to taste so good. That's going to feel good. But then afterwards, you might even feel bad about it. And so like in this discussion, just thinking about like those moments when that happens in your life and recognizing that the executive function, which is the management system of your brain, like it's about self-control. It's about memory. It's like all of the like flexible thinking, like literally the logical framework for your life.
It kind of makes me think of like if you have an assistant or a secretary, like the person who's supposed to keep you on track and tell you what you're supposed to be doing. It's like they're trying their hardest, fighting for their life to get you to do what you're supposed to do. And you'd be like, yeah, I'm actually just going to take the afternoon off. But I was running into that term, executive function, while I was reading those little articles in bed and scrolling through while I was probably nibbling on some cookies or something. And so I was like, well, what is executive function? Because, they were like, well, if you're choosing this short term, then you might have an issue with executive function. So then I went in that rabbit hole. So executive function, as Carlie said, is that management system of the brain. So it's what's really like making sure you're on track, doing the things that make sense for your body. And so if you are making like those short-term decisions, if you kind of feel torn in different places, if you feel impulsive.
That's what I was about to say. That's another example. When we were talking about, I told you I had a friend that got into an argument with her partner and got mad and like threw something out the wall. That is not a logical decision. You know what I'm saying? That was absolutely operating out of that amygdala, that prehistoric part of your brain that's not necessarily making sense.
Yeah, so like in those spaces, whether it's like as that dramatic or small as me like backtracking for no reason to drink some water, it's like, well, what's the reasoning for that? So there may be signs that you're having challenges with your executive function. And it can affect people different ways. So it could look like signs of ADHD, which is a problem with executive function, or I believe that it kind of can span like some different things. So again, this executive function isn't necessarily like a synonym for ADHD as far as I've seen.
No, but think about executive function being long-term satisfaction. Like whenever you're operating in executive function, you're focused on long-term satisfaction. You have to eat healthy and nutritious because you want to live a long, healthy life. You want to be a good runner. You want to be able to be a healthy partner and have a good sex drive versus being run by your amygdala. That's your emotional. Man, I want that cake. Dang, I don't feel like working out today. I'm tired. He gets on my nerves. Whatever that is. So think about kind of when you're in the brain, most of the time when you're in the amygdala, you're operating for short-term satisfaction.
So what are some of those signs that you may have some challenges?
So having trouble starting and or completing tasks, so having difficulty prioritizing tasks. You might struggle to remember what you just heard or read, like being present. I think being present is a big issue.
I'll be having all these. The next one's like when you have trouble following directions or like a sequence of steps. I can't even do that because then I'm starting to move around in between. Being panicked if rules or routines change. Another one is if you have trouble switching your focus from one task to another.
Getting overly emotional and like fixating on a thing, having trouble organizing your thoughts, having trouble keeping track of your belongings if you're always losing things, and then having trouble managing your time. I heard another example of this yesterday where you might look at a clock and be like, oh, cool, I got 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But then like you're time blind and you're like, oh, let me get this water. Oh, let me organize this. Oh, man, let me dust this shelf off. Let me do this. And all of a sudden 30 minutes have went by and now you're late.
Yeah, that's what, anytime I like hop into a meeting late, I'd be like, because you get the reminders 10 minutes before, and I'll get the reminder and be like, okay, I got 10 minutes. And then it's like, let me get in the Zoom. But I also, again, to remind everybody and to level set it, all of these things are like human things. Mm-hmm. But if you are never on time, if you're never organized, you know when you just is all off, then you may want to do some research into executive function and see, what you think might make sense in your situation.
Yeah, and again, this isn't a diagnosis, and some of these can seem like personality quirks, and that's fine. But if you notice that it's really starting to keep you from reaching your goals or holding you back or whatever, like spend some time thinking about how you can do better, which we're about to hop into.
Yeah, and I like that you said personality, because I think we can be known for that. Like, my friends think of me as like a squirrel, because they're like, man, you can't pay attention to nobody.
Squirrel.
Yeah, they be like, you looking over here and doing this and that. But also, and we can take that, right? Like, oh yeah, that, that's just how I am. And yet, when I really think about it, I'm like, you know what? I wasn't always like this to certain degrees of things, right? And I think stress over years and certain things over years has made me even more like I try my best just to even sit still doing these podcasts. Like, when I look at the recordings after, I'm like, God dang it, I'm swaying and doing this and like doing this and touching everything. Like, back in the day, I didn't have as much of that issue. So also, I would say, think about that and ask yourself, have you always been like that, or like how things might have changed over time? Because then you also know, like, okay, there's something I can reel back, and like I could probably regulate to get back to a space of being a little bit less like having these issues.
And I think it's beautiful that anytime you want to, you can change things about yourself and your personality, so it doesn't just have to be a thing.
Yeah. So this brought me to the question, like, okay, so executive function. So if I can enhance my executive function, will that help me prioritize those more boring or less stimulating or long-term type things as opposed to the short-term gratification? So then I started looking into like, well, how can you enhance your executive function?
And so one of the ways is to manage your environment. And so I think one thing that always gets us is if your space is, so here's an example of managing your environment. If your space is not clean, then you will be like, oh, let me do the dishes. Let me sweep. Oh, let me dust this thing. Let me organize these books before I get started on my task. And then like an hour and a half has went by and you haven't done the things you're setting out to do. And so setting up your environment for success, like whatever that means for you. So whether it's making sure things stay clean and organized, if like the night before, so when you wake up, you can start fresh. If that's making sure you have, good, nutritious food in the house so that you're not just buying stuff, or eating donuts haphazardly, but setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, I went crazy the other day. In the past week, I made a conscious decision to make sure everything was prepped before the next day. Usually I wake up and then I'm looking at my email, look at my list, see what I need to do, make my list and all that. But I was like, you know what? Let me do my chores. Let me set my to-do list and all that at nighttime. And then so the other night, I'm like cleaning up rooms, and then once I start, like I was on the baseboards and everything. Like once you start, like you keep going. Did the dishes. I pre-made my tzatziki and pre-marinated my chicken for the next day, like because I knew the next day is like, okay, if I'm gonna do this 5-mile run, and then I know I have a meeting at a certain time, I only have this much time. Let me prep it so I'm ready. And I realized that when I do that, when I wake up now and it's like, oh, here's my to-do list. Let me just get started. And also things are ready, so it's like I'm not wasting any time. And like we said with one of the previous episodes and this, sometimes you have trouble just getting started. So if I take away those obstacles and I just start, once you start, then it's like, oh, I'm good. And I'm really much more productive like the whole day. So to think about how you move and what makes sense for you, manage your environment in that way, because it can really make a big difference. I was way more productive last week. And one of the biggest things too, last week that I noticed is in the mornings I will I don't know how to explain it, but like in the mornings I'll be more prone to like, let me hop on Twitter and like see what's going on and do stuff while I'm like chilling around the house or getting ready for the day. But now it's like, well, I noticed if my to-do list was here and it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna just get started with work instead of reading and chilling first. I never hopped online in the morning, and when you don't start hopping online or start scrolling, you don't keep doing it through the day. So I would notice like, oh shoot, I haven't even tweeted all day, or I haven't really looked at it until the afternoon because I didn't see what that crazy story in the morning was. You know how it always be like in the morning, like first shift is like, oh, what's the fly out story, or what's, what are people talking about? So that really makes a difference, because once you start for the day looking at Twitter, you keep kind of getting.
That's like sugar. So that's why you can't have sugar first thing, because it's a dopamine hit and you'll be craving it all day. And so social media is also a dopamine hit, and then you just kind of keep wanting that all day. I don't know
what's going on.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, but I didn't keep going to it every 5 seconds, because it's like I never started with it. So I was like, okay, I understand how like that makes sense. Like, just get started, because once I start doing other stuff, then I'm off. Another way to enhance your executive function is tying emotion to goals. What does that mean?
What's your why? I think to me, it's like remembering your why.
Make those long-term
to
things
help you
important.
to check in with your like long-term, like, I have this chocolate cake in front of me, but we already talked about this with myself. Like, so why not make the decision that I already committed to, and remember why I'm doing it. Remember why I said I was doing this 5-mile run. Remember when I said I was going to hike with my friend and do these things versus like other stuff. And so just checking in with, I would say, like your higher or your ideal self, and like will help you like stay on track.
It's kind of tricking. Well, I don't know if it's tricking yourself, but it's like, you're making sure you keep the heightened reward, as opposed to like, ooh, the chocolate cake. The heightened reward is, dang, my body's starting to look better. Like, thinking about it in that way.
Yeah, maybe rechanging that narrative.
That's also kind of tied to you actually being in action a little bit too. I will say that once you start with the habits the right way, then I think it's much easier to keep that in mind, because it's like, oh, I'm doing it and I'm seeing something. So like, yeah, I want to keep seeing that. Another thing is that you need to make sure you're meeting your basic needs. So I remember when I told Carlie this story, one of the things she told me, and I was like, oh, you're right. I was like, why would I double back for some water? Like, that's so goofy. Like, for what? And she was like, well, you might have been dehydrated, or you might be, and not that I was like thirsty. It just was like, I want a little water. But she was like, but you needed to drink water. And so maybe if you have been meeting your basic needs and have been drinking more water that day, or not drinking this or that or whatever, you might not have had that random thought to be like, go back and get some water. So I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So you have to take care of yourself, and make sure that you're getting sleep, that you're drinking water, that, you're moving and doing the things, because maybe you're less likely to be like, I need dopamine, or I need endorphins, and then grabbing that cake or grabbing whatever. Like I'm not a Christian, but for Lent, I gave up processed sugar. And so I was thinking like, okay, this is going to be difficult. Meanwhile, I managed my environment by having hella cutie oranges and apples and stuff. And then 2, it's like, all right, my basic needs are kind of being met because I'm getting my endorphins from the exercise I've been doing now, other things I've been doing, and I don't even feel like I need to grab onto those things as much anymore. So like all of these work together, but make sure you remember to meet your basic needs, because things pop up for a reason.
And when you're prepared, and you're taking care of yourself, and you feel whole, and you feel regulated, and everything is working right, it's easier to stay on track. It's like taking care of a car. And then another thing that you can do to enhance your executive function and to focus on long-term satisfaction is to try practicing one task at a time. We often think that we are good multitaskers, and nobody is scientifically. Sorry, even you. If you're like, but I am. No, you're not. Scientifically, nobody is. Our brains weren't necessarily designed that way. I'll be interested to see the data in 50 years, but as of now, we're really not designed that way. And so setting like one task at a time can be very helpful.
And the thing about multitasking is people say you're multitasking, and you're not multitasking. You're switching tasks very quickly. Like, you're still only doing one thing in that moment, but then you're switching to something else and switching to something else and switching to something else. So multitasking isn't even really an accurate like name for that.
No, also. And that's exhausting. By the way, for your brain.
Mentally, yes, it is exhausting. I've been doing that too in the last week, because like I had some of the top things on my list. I'm like, let me start with that first. It's like working on this treatment, and like when you're making decks and stuff, you're like, this shit takes longer than you be thinking, like hours just to get the pictures just where you want them and stuff. And I was like, 2 hours in, like, oh dang, I've been working on this a long time, because I'm just focused on this one thing. So it's very helpful. You get much farther than trying to be like this. And then lastly, you can enhance your executive function by doing what you say you're going to do, and really just practicing that discipline. And you can start small with that. So I'm really proud of myself, because from this time being in the Bahamas when I wrote what I wrote, I remember also being there and looking up anti-inflammatory meal plans, and like I just kind of made a decision, like I just want to feel better and like eat better and, just treat my body better. And from then, because I found the meal plans, I'm like, okay, really it's just getting these certain vegetables that I need and I can make like 4 or 5 different things from. And I've been getting my groceries, which are saving me a lot of money versus Uber eating all the time. Been making my stuff, so I'm eating better. And then the more I'm eating better, I'm feeling better. I'm feeling a little bit more regulated. I've been doing my running. I got back into it. I got a little off in the holidays because that was which is understandable. But I'm back on consistently on my running plan. That feels good. It feels good when it's like I'm working and all of a sudden it's like, damn, man, I really want to go run. I really want to run. I really want to run. I really don't, but like my body's like, go run, go run, go run. So I'm like, all right. Like it feels good to have, now it's like my short-term thing says like, go run instead of whatever else trash, like do nothing or sit down or whatever. And so I think it's that discipline of sticking to things, and you have to figure out what you need to do to help you stick to those things. But like I said earlier, once you start doing something, once you do it a little bit, it's like, okay, I'm here, so I'm going to keep going with it.
Yeah, and I would say self-discipline is one of the highest forms of self-love. And so as we're working on becoming our ideal selves and achieving your goals and doing that, like just building that momentum every day. And again, it could look different for other people, but it is cool to start to, you just see how that shapes your life and all the other things around it. It's like a ripple effect in how it affects everything in your life.
Yeah. And I still get stuck too, because it's still those small things that I do all the time. Like I might be going to the kitchen to get some water, but on the way I pass my humidifier and I'm like, oh, I want to fill up the humidifier. So I'm making the whatever. And then in my head, I literally sit there and be like, which one should I do first? Which one makes more sense? And it's like, I don't know, that probably doesn't matter that much, but I am starting to be much more aware of when I said I'm doing a thing and now like something else pops up. I still try to negotiate which one makes the most sense to do. But, so I don't know if that's going away or not, but it helps just to keep practicing like which thing makes the most sense. Especially when it's like for you and your health and your body and all of that. So we're still working on it, still a practice, but it's feeling good thus far. So I'm going to just keep it going.
Yeah, let's get that momentum going and keep it going. Hit us at Carlie's Couch and let us know if you struggle with any of these things, and also if you have found something that works, that has helped you, be able to focus more on your long-term satisfaction.
Yes, and this week we want you to prioritize your future self. Think about those things that make the most sense and just see, even if it's one thing, 2 things, if you can choose, make a better choice rather. Hope you have a good week. We'll see you next time.
Bye, y'all.